Hey, Frank and Arlo. Greetings from the Atlantic Ocean. We get into Ponta Delgada, which is in the Azores Islands of Portugal tomorrow. So I won't be doing one of these. We're heading out for the trip of a lifetime, and we'll see both of you guys when we get home. Today I want to tell you about the queens. That's what my mom called them, and I guess everybody in the family called my Aunt Elsie and Aunt Babe the queens. Like I talked about yesterday with Uncle John, they were my great aunts. So that makes them your great great aunts. These are people that your dads knew, and Uncle Sam knew. Their cousins, my brother, your great Uncle Richard, his kids knew the queens, but Uncle Richard and I knew the queens not in their heyday. They were middle age-ish, a little bit old by the time I was a kid. By the time that your dads knew them, they were these little old ladies that lived next door to us on York Street. They had rented an apartment. They were aunts when I was a kid that were there on every holiday. And what I remember most about them was candy. I can't remember the candy for every holiday, but some of them stand out. Washington's birthday, which they called Burthington's Wash Day, were these cherries that they were fake cherry hard candy, and there'd be a cherry on each stem of fake stem. You couldn't eat the stem. It was made out of something with wire in it that was green. But it looked just like cherries, and they were delicious. They had, of course, the Easter eggs, candy canes, but they went to some special store in downtown Philadelphia, I forget the name of it, and bought this really, really cool candy. Excuse me. I remember especially marzipan. They bought rock candy, which has a string in the middle of it. And what you do is you make a very concentrated sugar water and put the string in it, and the sugar crystallizes on that string, and it will eventually build a fairly big chunk of clear sugar. It looks kind of like an ice cube. They also had a licorice version of that, which they called candy coal. It was black. It was shiny. You couldn't really see through it. It wasn't even opaque, but it was very similar. You would be able to see kind of through it if it was, or at least it would have been opaque if it wasn't black. And it came in a little wheelbarrow with a pickaxe. You could smash it apart. It was a metal pickaxe, a little tiny one. Let's see what other ones. Marzipan, if I didn't mention that. First time I ever had marzipan was then. Marzipan is the most delicious cookie in the entire universe, and I believe the place that we're going to tomorrow in Portugal is known for its marzipan. So I'll be imbibing in some of that, partaking in some marzipan. When I was a kid, the queens, my Aunt Babe and Aunt Elsie, the two spinster aunts who always were together. They did everything together. Their stories were about when they were younger and they did things together. Like one time they took the iconic American 1930s kind of road trip from the East Coast all the way out to the West. Cars were slower then, there were no interstates, so you had to go slowly out and back, stopping at many, many hotels. There were no hotel chains, motels, things like that, so you would stop at places, you would stop for every meal. There were no Airbnbs, so you were going to have to pay for all your meals. And it would take a couple months to really do a nice trip. In fact, I always thought of them, when I was a kid, there was a TV show on called I Love Lucy. And at one point in time, I guess they ran out of ideas, so they had Lucy and Ricky, her husband, take that iconic trip out west. I guess they lived in, well, they might have taken an iconic trip out east, because they might have lived in California. It was the same kind of thing. They got into all kinds of adventures. My Aunt Babe and Aunt Elsie had stories about, I think they ran into not a buffalo, but something. They hit something like a moose or an elk, some kind of enormous animal, and the car broke down, and the freaking animal was right near the car. I can only imagine what Aunt Elsie's reaction to hitting this large animal was, because whenever something went down, Aunt Elsie would uncontrollably go like, woo, 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 woo. One time, your great-grandpa Clark was driving someplace, and the Queens were in the back seat, and Aunt Elsie saw something and started doing that. And my dad almost crashed the car. So Aunt Elsie was from Philly. She lived there her whole life. I talked about her apartment yesterday. It was a really cool apartment, and we saw her a lot. We didn't see Aunt Babe as much. Sometimes Aunt Babe would come down to Philly to hang out with Aunt Elsie, but a lot of times Aunt Elsie would go up to Newark. And our vacations in Newark would sometimes coincide with Aunt Elsie being up there. I don't remember ever being in Newark where Aunt Babe lived, visiting her, yet Aunt Elsie wasn't there also. Now, Aunt Elsie, I don't remember any stories of her ever dating a man except for one guy. I think there were men that went on this iconic road trip with them. I forget the names, but I knew Aunt Elsie for a long time. There was never any like, oh yeah, there's this man that she loves, or a man that she loved, or anything. But there was never anything else. It was just like, oh, well, she's a spinster. She enjoys the single life. Aunt Babe was a little different. There was this woman who would be up there. Her name was Sunny. And Aunt Babe called her Rob. She was this kind of short woman with a low voice. And I never thought anything about the fact that she had a friend whose name was Sunny, and she called her Rob. And then one time when I was in my early 20s, I guess, I'd come back from the Air Force, and I was hanging out with my friend Meatball. We decided we needed haircuts, so we went around to the local barber shop, a place that I had never gone to when I was younger. And we got haircuts. The guy's name was Lepsy. I think it was Charlie Leps was his real name, but it was Lepsy's Barbershop. And he had a sign in the window that said, if you don't like your haircut, bring it back, which makes no sense. And we were in there getting our hair cut. He knew Charlie really well. He cut Charlie's hair his whole life. And he said to me, like, "Oh, you from around here?" I said, "Yeah." "What's your family?" I said, "Well, my last name's Clark." "Clark? You got Frank Clark. Is it Frank Clark?" "Yeah, yeah." "Oh, I know your dad." He said, "Oh, that's cool." He said, "Yeah, you got an Aunt Frances, right?" I said, "Yeah, I went to high school with her. She's a dyke." I went, "What?" Yeah. So I guess he outed my Aunt Babe. And look, if she was happy, she was happy. Aunt Babe lived, as I said, in Newark, and we would take these big trips up there. Before 95, I guess the turnpike was available, and sometimes we would take the turnpike, but there was no 95 to get up there. We would take Route 1, US 1, in Philly, that's the Roosevelt Boulevard. And it just kept going up. It went through Trenton and Elizabeth, New Jersey, and then into Newark. There were landmarks, the Anheuser-Busch. They had this giant brewery with this enormous Anheuser-Busch eagle or whatever bird that is that's on their beer. Their beer sucks, by the way. And that was, we knew how close we were based on that. She lived in a 3-story walk-up apartment that was across the street from the PJs, from the projects, and it was amazing. You'd look out the window and see like crap going down on the roof of the projects. Like, whoa. And she said, if we wanted to go out for a walk, she'd go like, "Yeah, just make sure you're back before dark." It was kind of a shady neighborhood. Later on, I guess in the mid-90s, I had a chance to go back up there and find it. Because as I said in the beginning of this, she wound up eventually moving down to Philadelphia with to be next door to my mother, so my mother could help take care of her and her sister Elsie. And they were very, very nice ladies. I probably wasn't as good a nephew as I could have been, but they were very nice to me, especially when I was a little kid. They kind of spoiled me. Neither of them had children, so I was kind of their kid. And then when Uncle Richard came along, he was kind of like their kid. And I remember when we would get there to Newark, park the car, we'd go to the first floor, and you'd go into the foyer and ring the bell, and then she buzzed us in. And we would get to the staircase, which is not circular, but they kind of go so you can look up, and the person at the top can look down, and Aunt Babe would look down and go, "Who dat?" And your great Nana would say, "Who dat? Who said who dat?" And you're never going to guess what Aunt Babe would say in reply. "Who dat? Who said who dat? Who dat? Who dat?" It said who dat? Who dat? Who said who dat? Who said who dat? Who dat? Well, whatever it was. It fortunately didn't go any further than that. And then we would climb up those stairs. There were things that I remember. Sometimes Aunt Babe and Aunt Elsie would drink a little too much, and they were pretty funny when they would drink. They always made really delicious meals, but it took them forever to do it. And I remember one time they were half lit. They started early in the afternoon. They were going to make a souffle. And for some reason, Aunt Elsie was convinced that the cheese for the souffle had to be cut into exact cubes that were maybe a half an inch each side. So she started doing that. And then she would run into the bathroom, and my mom would go, Jesus Christ, this is gonna take forever. Well, she got the whole thing done and dropped it on the floor, and the cheese just went everywhere. So my mom said something like, well, I guess we'll have to get some Chinese takeout. And Aunt Elsie just didn't skip a beat. She said, oh, I have plenty more cheese. And she went in and got plenty more cheese out and started cutting it and cutting it and cutting it. And I think we ate about 8 o'clock that night. By the time your fathers and Uncle Sam and their cousins, Richard's kids, knew Aunt Elsie and Aunt Bay, they were little old ladies. They walked with walkers and they were kind of cranky. I can relate to it because I'm 68 years old now, and sometimes it's hard for me to walk. And believe it or not, sometimes I can be a little bit cranky. But I was there when each one of them died. Not physically in the room or anything, but by that time I was a police officer, and we called 911. What I mean by there, I forget which one died first, but after the first one died, the second one had to go into a home. But I was in Philly, so I was involved in their lives at that point in time. It was a shame to see them as shells of themselves, because they were some fascinating people. And next up, I'm going to tell you about Aunt Edith and Uncle Bob, a couple of other fascinating people from the same family tree. Aunt Edith was a sister of my man, and she never had children. But I'll tell you that story tomorrow. Listen, peace out, guys.